Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Brandon Harnish. In this conversation, we talk about post-liberalism, what it means to inhabit a post-liberal frame of mind, and how that doesn't make one necessarily anti or illiberal, but contending with the dissolution of thick private and public bonds. And what is the balance between liberty and compulsion, authority and freedom? That's what we discuss. You can find his work linked below. He's very involved in his local community in Wells County. So if you want to support him, there'll be links to that as well below, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Brandon Harnish.
So you're asking about my political background. So as probably anyone who's 39 years old would probably say, you've been through maybe many chapters or iterations, probably more than you can remember, of different political views or political ideologies, if you will. Mm-hmm. Dispositionally, I'm conservative and haven't always been that way, though even in my libertarian years, which that's really how I got into politics. And what was, as a libertarian, I was 18 years old. I started a county Libertarian party. As any 18-year-old would, really not knowing what you're doing. You have no idea what you're getting into at all. But I did it. And truth be told, 20 years later, when I joined the Republican Party and ran for office in a small town, some of the old Republicans remembered that I was the guy that started the Libertarian Party 20 years prior, and there were grudges that were
oh, really?
I had to kind of earn some trust, I think, which
interesting.
Hopefully I have at this point.
Well, what would distinguish the Libertarians from the Republicans, or foster bad blood between them?
That's a great question. I mean, you could write, and there have been books written about the difference between libertarianism and what you might call like conservatism, or perhaps or paleoconservatism. Patrick Deneen, in his book, Why Liberalism Failed, it makes an interesting distinction that the first time I read the book, I'd never really considered before, at least in these terms. The difference between actually being a conservative, like a right-wing conservative, and being a right liberal. And so you're kind of the right hand of liberalism as opposed to the left hand of liberalism. And one of the so I'll kind of use that as a framework to talk about this question, and I'll try to weave my own sort of political journey into that answer. The distinction here between maybe libertarianism and conservatism, libertarianism, probably a good place to start the conversation. Libertarianism is very individualistic. And as I look back on my own life in my own adult life over the last 25 years, I turned 18 in 2004. Yeah, 2004. Graduated from college, 2004, 2005, class of 05. So you kind of get a timeline. I was very individualistic in my imagination and in the kind of the way I saw the world. When I started the Libertarian Party, when I considered myself a libertarian, that individualism was always present. But it was against a backdrop of a kind of conservatism that valued like things like, you just kind of assumed gender roles. You kind of assumed that people understood the difference between male and female. These, I would probably call social constructs, but that's not to sort of dismiss them at all. Mm-hmm. You just kind of assume those things. You assume that there's a value, sort of, there's an appreciation of family as an institution. So you kind of call yourself an individualist, but you have all of these assumptions that a real individualist would not really assume. So it's a very kind of American libertarianism that, I'm a libertarian, I'm an individualist. Yeah. But I believe
faith, family, freedom.
Yeah. Right. It's like, wait, well, this is actually not really all that coherent. And then reading some reading some Catholic authors as I kind of began my process towards conversion, you kind of realize that there's actually a really deep tension between the Christian faith and some of the values of the faith, the sort of lived values, the social values of the Christian faith, and sort of American libertarianism. And even within its own sort of framework, American libertarianism lives in tension with itself, American individualism. So again,
just look at the Libertarian Party and the hijinks that it gets up to.
I mean, it's embodied in the Libertarian Party because you have these two wings of the party. It's not like the Republican Party. The Republican Party has different wings, right? Yeah. But everybody in the Republican Party is going to say that, like,
they're all going to wear clothes and probably a suit to begin with.
Right. Like, there's still this kind of foundation. Like, I have a lot of disagreements with members of my own party, but none of them are really going to say that a man can be a woman or a woman can be a man, that we can override through the power of reason and just science. That we
or
can
pass out syringes on the street, other extreme versions of libertarian.
The tensions that I'm talking about inside libertarianism, in American libertarianism, are embodied in the Libertarian Party today, which that's not that's not through any fault of the members of the party. That is just the nature of the kind of fragmentation we're living in our world. So the
So when you were 18, you had a vision of individualism, and you started to see these tensions or these assumptions start to get questioned, probably around the time of the Great Awakening or the Pre-Awakening.
It's difficult to maybe track, but probably the best way to sum it up is just transgenderism. So. I think your instincts are right on that. There's probably some footnotes and some other rabbit holes I could go down, but that really, for me, once that started to sort of come to the surface, and it actually kind of throttled my Protestantism as well. I historically, I grew up in a Wesleyan church. My grandma founded a fundamentalist Wesleyan church in Bluffton, Indiana, with her sisters. This was way back. And I grew up in that church. Eventually, as a teenager, I gravitated towards a more contemporary sort of Wesleyan church, or Nazarene church, which is kind of in the same circles, sort of just conservative evangelical, but maybe with some shades of fundamentalism in there. And from where I come from, look, I'm not trying to pose as an expert on Protestantism or anything like that. That's not the intention of what I'm saying, but I found the explanations for, so once some of these assumptions on sex and gender started to crumble, I found the Protestant explanations kind of lacking. And the Catholic theology of the body gave me something that I felt I thought was more substantial as an explanation for why Christianity holds this male-female relationship as something that is sacrosanct under the rubric of marriage, under that framework.
Yeah.
And the connection of our bodies to a sort of spiritual reality that is sort of, it's our physical bodies are sort of a reflection of a Trinitarian nature of God.
It's not just the relationship between our bodies and the transcendent, but the bodies map the path towards holiness. They're part of
yes, that's such a beautiful
process of worship.
Yeah. Right. And so in the weakness in Protestant circles, you could probably find an exceptional Reformed Calvinist who would perhaps not disagree with some of these Catholic ideas. But from where I came from, I mean, it's primarily a matter of scripture. There's not a lot of philosophy that accompanies that. There's not a theology of the body. There's not an anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
And Christianity, in my world, did become very disembodied. And, you know, in Midwestern Protestantism, you know, fundamentalism, there's no sacraments, you know.
Yeah.
It is a matter of sola scriptura. That's where truth is found. And so,
and if you can interpret the Bible however way you want, you might as well be able to interpret your body however you want.
Yeah, I mean, what authority other than yourself are we pointing to?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm not the most articulate voice on these theological questions, but
that was a part of triggering a deepening of your understanding. But why transgenderism? Why sex and sexuality? Is it something that you saw impact your family members, or was there some sort of reflex deep down inside that you're like, this is off?
So what is more fundamental to who we are? I mean, you know, I just had a little boy. From the moment of his conception, he is a boy. He is a man. And I have a daughter. From the moment of her conception, she is a little daughter. She's a girl. There's nothing more fundamental. I mean, perhaps somebody would, you know, you could say, well, I'm just human. We're just humans, right? And it's like, well, I mean, are you just a human? I mean, perhaps in a very abstract sense, we can speak about a brotherhood of humanity, but that doesn't wipe away the particular details of who we are. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, once those fundamental, and when I say fundamental, I don't know anything more bedrock than our sex and our gender. I mean, gender aside, I mean, I don't know anything that's more fundamental to who we are than our sex. And to watch that crumble it was clearly a moment for me. You know, it really, it was well, I mean, the Jay Burden podcast, you guys talk about the concept of apocalypse or revelation. It was a revealing of where we are in our culture. We don't know who we are. It had a profound impact on me and on my faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you reach out? Sounds like you started reading things, but did you reach out for some sort of church authority? Did you find the church lacking?
No. So we joined the Catholic Church, my wife and I, in 2024. My daughter was born December of 23, and we joined the church Easter of 24. And we took RCIA during that time. And so this is, I guess, perhaps at the height of the Great Awakening.
It's still reverberating.
Yeah. Some may date that earlier, but it was
Biden's the period over which Biden is the symbolic ruler.
Yeah.
Was that echoing was reverberating. It broke in 2020, I think. And there were premonitions of it leading up to 2020. 2020 is the big explosion, and then you watch the government kind of echo and echo and echo all these different.
I think that's right. I mean, when I say it's the height of it, it doesn't actually feel quite right, because at that point there was a resistance building to it, sort of an immune defense from the body politic sort of emerging. Yeah. I mean, you might say 2018 or 2019 was the height of it because cancellation, or 2020 cancellation, was just, there's no fighting back. There was no collective will, and individually there was very little courage. Once the media mob got its eyes on you, once the woke mob decided they wanted to burn your house down, it was done. But
Were you terribly aware of politics, I guess you were politically active, so you were invested in the Libertarian Party, and then you participated with the Republican Party, so you're aware of this culture war or this political
yeah. So I
aspect
should probably sort of go back to the main thread here. So, I started this Libertarian Party back in '05 locally. It's kind of where we started the conversation. But I went to college right around in the summer of that, or in the late summer of '05, and moved away, and so abandoned the Libertarian Party project.
Okay.
In college, I remember 2007, 2008, I supported Ron Paul, but that was at a period of time where I was really moving into a sort of probably at the time I would have called it like an apolitical phase, but not an apathetic phase, but probably more of an anarcho-capitalist or an anarchist phase.
You're going to get yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the individualism did me no favors from high school, right? Like so here we are, 2008, Ron's running for office, 2012, he's running for office, 2012, I support him, but I don't vote for him, right? I'm not voting at that point. I mean, this is still very much anarcho-capitalist libertarian. And Donald Trump, 2015 runs for office. I'm not voting at that point. 2016 election, I'm not voting. Was amused to watch him win. That was delightful. I remember election night. It was an incredible moment.
That was a phenomenal moment. Can you describe your reaction to that? Why the glee?
I mean, look, I'm like anybody else. The reactions were incredible. to watch the press cry, to watch Democrats scream. I mean, even though I wasn't a partisan Republican or anything like that, there was, you still kind of recognize who the losers are, who the dorks are. And it was funny to watch them, just the emotional anguish, right? I mean, this is petty grief that they're going through. You wouldn't laugh if they were in real grief, but
yeah, if Hillary happened to be shot through the neck, you wouldn't dance on her grave.
No, yeah. You're not celebrating at that point. You're actually horrified. But when it's an election loss and, the talking heads on MSNBC are crying.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was some laughter. But as many guys my age, in their 30s, I didn't become what I would call sort of politically active, right? It's one thing to sort of read the books and to have an ideology, to talk philosophy. That I did that all through college and after. And at that sort of, during that sort of anarcho phase, I eventually gravitated towards the Anabaptist church. Coming from a Swiss German background, my family's Swiss German. Harnish is a very common name over in Pennsylvania, sort of Amish Mennonite territory. I felt very rooted in that sort of Anabaptist tradition, at least for a little bit. But the Anabaptist churches around my area were either becoming conservative evangelical. So that is, they were kind of losing their Anabaptist distinctiveness, or they were becoming woke. And I was attending the woke Anabaptist church. I was the sort of resident conservative in this progressive church. I liked the people very much, and I still have respect for those people. But the liberalism, it was beginning to alienate me as a member of that church.
Like from the inside or the outside, by which I mean, were the people starting to look down on you and find you distasteful, or was the ideology starting? The ideology
was becoming a problem, and the people didn't look down on me. We got along very well. We had respectful conversations. I wasn't as far right as I am now. I was open-minded. I mean, okay. So like I kind of went down a rabbit hole here. So let me kind of bring this back. So
just to fill in the background, 2015, 2016, you're probably waist or chest deep into your professional life. You're probably, most of your energy is going into your career at this point.
That's right. I mean, look, 2015, 2016, not only do I have other things on my plate, but the idea of running for political office, joining the Republican Party, is not even on my radar. I'm much more as far as politics goes, to borrow the Pete Quinones phrase, I'm living in Ancapistan in my own head, right? That's what I'm doing at that time. It wasn't until COVID. I'm sort of building to that, right? So I said earlier, like a lot of guys in their 30s, they lived through COVID. And again, to kind of bring back that Jay Burden comment, it was an apocalypse, a revelation of what's going on. I remember watching the Summer of Love, the George Floyd riots. Nobody's masking, nobody's social distancing, but it's all right. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, this is a problem. Like, this is not just what became clear to me is that the state is not the enemy. So for an anarcho-capitalist to sort of realize, wait a minute, the state is not the enemy. These people who are using the state to injure my fellows, they're the enemy. They've picked up this weapon. And you could see it most clearly, again, a revelation, an unveiling, an apocalypse, June of 2020. Mm-hmm. To watch the establishment public health world. I mean, every public health official was being interviewed. Racism is a public health crisis. We endorse these protests. While you can't go to church, your business is shut down. You can't go out to eat. You can't go to the basketball court. The schools are closed. Normal life is closed down, right? But activist life, the door is wide open.
Well, a certain type of activist life.
Right. I mean, like the right doesn't really have activists. Like at that time, like we had the Tea Party 15 years ago. But what other right wing?
No, the 4chan, the frogs, the people who memed Trump into office.
You have Charlottesville. Maybe, but that's not
in Charlottesville
network. I mean, at any rate, the left wing activist life was fine. You could do that. In fact, you could commit crimes, and that was okay. And that's where it's like, okay, I've been operating under an illusion. The idea that the state is the enemy. Like I've got a book on my shelf called Our Enemy, the State by Albert J. Nock. Okay. That is living through 2020 in a week. My whole perspective changed. And it just weighed on me. The fact that these people have picked up a weapon and they're using it against us. The state is that weapon. So that was a pivot point. And at that point, wasn't long after I joined the Republican Party because I was unsatisfied with the Republican Party.
Okay. Yeah.
I remember early on, hearing criticism from my libertarian friends, like, well, the Republican Party is the party of Bush. It's the party of Romney. It's the party of McCain, the wars. My response is, like if everything was great in the Republican Party, I wouldn't be necessary. And that, like, there's, I lived through all that. I lived through Bush, McCain, and Romney. You're not telling me anything I don't know. I mean, I started the Libertarian Party in 2005 because it was just abundantly clear that the Bush administration, like, this is not, this is not limited government in any capacity. So, again, 18 years old, but, the Patriot Act, the wars, the spending, you can go down the list.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Wherever that's going. But, just want to highlight a little difference between you and the people I, lovingly regard as the left me's, the politically homeless. When they go through that red pilling, so to speak, when 2020 hits and they realize that their liberalism is actually a mask for authoritarianism and for just enabling the far left to just run hog wild and they start to question their assumptions, their liberal assumptions, they have a crisis at the level of identity. When you described a similar process, you had a crisis at the level of perception. And there's a little slight difference between how people that are more on the right and people that more on the left are confronted by what happens in 2020. And so you have less of a crisis going on, but you still have to start to question your assumptions. But you don't have to question your entire framework because you already had questioned the liberal framework, it sounds like. And by liberal, I would like to understand that's one of the things that I wanted to question you about, because not question, interrogate you about, waterboard you maybe a little bit in a calm podcasting manner. What does it mean to be post-liberal?
Yeah, I have.
And I think that we already have the bedrock contained in this conversation, because liberal to you meant libertarian and meant individualism. So there's a vector of liberalism that goes towards the liberal individualist, and there's a branch of liberalism that goes into the more social constructivist kind of realpolitik of how to actually govern and wield power.
So what does it mean to be post-liberal? That's the question. I have post-liberal in my Twitter bio.
Yeah.
The little Catholic flag right next to it. So, to say post-liberal, to say perhaps post-libertarian, for me, they're similar. And post-liberal in some ways speaks to an abandonment of what I had personally previously valued. So in my estimation, and I'm not trying to give you an academic definition. I don't know that I'm equipped for that. I'm not.
You can be a normie here. There's no judgment.
I'd like to speak more personally.
Yeah.
Going through this transformational process, I'm still the same guy that I was in 2020 and 2019 in a lot of ways. But in 2019, I got married. 2020, COVID hits. Summer of Love that I spoke to you about just a moment ago. Going through that, my mother died in 2022, early death, joined the church in 2024. That's a lot of growing up. And post-liberalism speaks to a reorientation of values in my own life. So I'm not primarily concerned with maximizing pleasure. I'm not.
Or agency, or I guess personal pursuit of happiness. That kind of.
Yeah. Okay. I like being married, and being married creates duties. I like being a father. Being a father creates duties. To be post-liberal in some ways is to really recognize that, I'm not an adult who was dropped onto this planet, like sort of in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I am a dependent man who was
with
born
dependence.
With dependence. Yes. And I'll get to that. I was born into a family, and my mother and father cared for me. I was wholly dependent on my mother and father to bring me to adulthood. And I'm paying that forward with my children. So that anthropology, like post-liberalism, is perhaps an abandonment of the idea of the sort of atomized, autonomous, freedom-seeking man. And you replace that concept with a dependent man with duties, who is a part of institutions and norms and a continuity that he inherited. So to me, that's really the core of what it means to be post-liberal. Mm-hmm. And it's lived. It means you're not your own authority. When I joined the church, I put myself under the authority of the magisterium, the tradition, and the scripture. I remember joining the church with my wife. She was questioning me about this concept of maybe abandoning sola scriptura, right? Like trying to understand what role tradition plays. And I thought, well, coming from a sola scriptura background, a fundamentalist background, even perhaps not the most sophisticated of understandings of sola scriptura. I know there are nuances, and I don't want to straw man anybody, but again, I'm just speaking about my experience with sort of the conversion, and what it means to be post-liberal is to say, well, I can pick up the Bible and I can read it, and I can come away with a lot of different, I can have my own interpretations, and I've done that. I've been in progressive Anabaptist circles where the Bible is read in a sort of radical, sort of revolutionary way. And I've been in fundamentalist circles where the Bible is read in an extremely conservative way. And you can find them both persuasive depending on sort of what information you're given, what your sort of priorities are. But the tradition to me is to bring other voices to the table, from different places, different times, people who are dealing with different problems. If you read the Bible in a time of grief versus reading the Bible at a time of rejoicing, maybe you have your first baby, you read the Bible, you're going to read it a lot differently. If you read the Bible in a period of extreme xenophobia, you might read the Bible differently than you would in a period of like mass open borders immigration. So it's important to understand that the tradition brings all of these different voices to the table.
Yeah.
Instead of just being trapped in our own time and our own place and in our own minds. So understanding sort of, again, and that speaks to the concept of continuity, speaks to the concept of of tradition. I mean, I'm not to be redundant, but we're talking about tradition.
Yeah.
And so it's an authority. And I think that kind of, again, it speaks to what it means to be post-liberal. I'm not just a guy dropped on the planet, this autonomous individual seeking his own sort of self-promotion or legacy. When my daughter was born, my time preference changed. My spending patterns and spending habits changed. Want to build her an inheritance more than I want to actually pursue my own sort of pet projects.
Yeah.
So I think that all from a personal perspective, again, not an academic definition, but all of those ideas I just sort of discussed speak to the concept of post-liberalism. Post-liberalism speaks to this matter of just being an embodied creature with limitations and dependencies. We don't use science and technology to choose our own destiny in sort of this radical transgenderist way. Excuse me.
Yeah, transhumanist.
Or transhumanist, right? This idea that we can wrench ourselves free of our limitations and our commitments and our duties, of all these things, right? Like whether they're natural limitations, physical limitations, or even the limitations that our neighbors and our friends and our families impose upon us, or that tradition imposes upon us in its wisdom.
There's a relationship to compulsion that is post-liberal. The one essence of liberalism that is kind of its spirit, more than any of its doctrines, which they don't call them doctrines, they call them rational axiomatic principles because they're a bunch of nerds when they get down into their theology, which isn't a theology, it's a political philosophy. But there's this, it's embodied in Milton's rendering of Lucifer in Paradise Lost. I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. There's like a deep current of daddy issues that it goes all the way back to the Reformation, and you could probably trace it back even further. But it's kind of in the West. It's still, there's that American pioneering spirit is still a part of the American identity. So there's still not the abdication of the tensions between the individual and the community, between personal agency, responsibility, and then the nested compulsions that you owe to the identities of being a father, being a husband, being a community member, being a business owner, being somebody who participates in the political process, and then somebody who every 4 years nominates or wishes that one person or another gets to be the figurehead of our nation. We're still an American. And to kind of tie that, to batten that down a little bit, I'm looking at your profile and I just want to read your identities. You're Catholic, husband, father, Hoosier, city council, GOP, paleocon, and then you're post-liberal at the end. There's something problematic about the term post-liberal because it sets itself in relationship to something else. And it allows liberalism to form the frame, which is, if that's your core identity, then you're always going to be a reactionary in a shallow sense. But that's kind of the last of your identities. Just intuitively, you put that kind of that open-ended part.
Yeah, and then there is a little Catholic, a little Vatican flag
that
right
puts
next
it all
to
the way back.
which kind of ties it all together, right? So,
yeah.
And that was all very intentional. And I suppose post-liberal, if you understand it with a reference to these other identities, it reminds you of the world in which we live and perhaps the order or the regime that is falling apart around us.
Mm-hmm.
We are post-liberal.
Yeah.
There is no denying where we come from. I mean, that sort of maybe the class, so sort of an archetype almost is the kid who from the Midwest who runs off to Beverly Hills or to California to break it big, and they hate their hometown, and they hate the religious sort of conservative way of life. Yeah, exactly. But their whole identity is still a reference to where they come from. So even if they, I think they're going to go be a big star, and they're going to be progressive on the coast, and they're going to be degenerate, and they're going to engage in all these things. It's a reaction. There's actually no identity there at all. So I think that archetype helps me remember what sort of where it can go, where it can go wrong. And the church helps me, like, look, I've said it before, that it's the church that keeps me from descending into a right wing, a very dark place, a very dark right wing place.
Okay.
And I have a tweet up from months ago, that I've been accused of being fascist, KKK, Nazi. It's like, no, I'm just Catholic. That's all I am. You want to know what I believe? I believe in the common good. I do. And so to kind of circle back to the question of what it means to be post-liberal, I think you may have talked for a moment about neutrality. You might not have, but it came to my mind in what you were saying. And something that I think, and perhaps this is a little more abstract or more academic than my personal anecdote, but recognizing that state institutions cannot be neutral is something. It's the post-liberal. So so I can't speak of it abstractly. Let me speak of it in my own experience. So I ran for county council in 2022. I was elected, started serving 2023. And once you're in power, even a lowly position like county council, you immediately, if you want to be effective, if you want to actually do your job, you are immediately confronted with questions of values. It is not enough to run for office, to take power, and then simply to act with a kind of neutrality that in fact does not exist. We can pretend it exists, right? And that's what liberalism does. It veils the power dynamics. It veils the valued decisions that are being made, right? It puts a cover over those, and it uses language like a sort of technocracy and economics and
Procedure.
These are them procedure, but those are themselves the values of liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no neutrality. Liberalism is itself a totalizing modernist ideology. And what I found fascinating was this, and this kind of speaks to what I'm talking about. There's this moment in our local library where a staffer, perhaps not inadvertently, handed out some rainbow bracelets. And it just so happened that this occurred on June 1st. And these rainbow bracelets were sort of an introduction into a summer reading program. So if you were a kid and you're a member of the reading program, you got your rainbow bracelet. And the lady is an older woman. Just the kids like big, bold primary colors. Mm-hmm. And it created a sort of a dust up here locally.
Yeah.
And so what the language we used to attack that problem was language of liberalism. It was neutrality. We approached the board and we approached the head librarian, saying, look, we don't, like, if it was up to me, there would be a Vatican flag flying outside the library. There would be a statue of the Virgin Mary, and there would be pictures of the saints. And of course, and a crucifix at the entrance, right? But I don't use my power. I don't use position. I don't use our governing institutions to enforce values on other people. We need to be neutral. So we're not going to enforce these the values of progressivism or wokeism or sort of this LGBTQ stuff.
Enforce or promote.
Or promote, right. We're not going to do that, right? We're going to be neutral. And what I discovered was that neutrality is an extremely effective way of sort of wrenching out certain things. Mm-hmm. So what occurred to me is this is the language that was used to remove Christianity from the public square. And you can see how it works, because there is this sort of classical liberal notion that, hey, look, I mean, if you're living through the wars of religion and you have Protestants and Catholics at each other's throats, neutrality is a useful tool. But if you create this if you're entering into Christendom and you're an atheist or you're secular, you use that language not just to sort of remove this religious tension, but to remove religion entirely. And so and
it's like that meme. It's a Simpsons meme where the bartender kicks out the schlubby alcoholic out of the front door of the bar, and then the schlubby alcoholic appears right behind him. So that's what's right religion. That's what happens with religion. Like no religion here.
That's right. Like, I mean, all community, all society is founded on some kind of myth. And so the notion that we're able to sort of create this neutral secular society. I mean, look at what George Floyd became. This is a whether or not it was a murder. Okay. But what I'm going to say, it was a founding
sacrifice,
right. Yeah. For an ideology. And he became sanctified by this mob. And those are the dynamics that are at play. And so when I use language like post-liberal as a label, it's really just a quick way to kind of remind myself that there is no neutrality. Mm-hmm. You have to have governing values. If you're and you don't really I didn't see it until I was actually in a position of authority. Lowly that position may be. I'm not the king of the county. I am just one of 7 on county council. Mm. You still can see it. You can recognize it. And there are, and let me give you one example in terms of economics. So if you're a sort of libertarian minded free market guy and you get on your county council, you believe in the free market. What if the free market decides that your county doesn't deserve to exist? It's inefficient. That in fact, everybody should really just move to a big city. That because those are the signals being sent. Now, I'll tell you, we don't live in a free market. We live in a rigged market that just so happens to be rigged against small communities like my own. But what the decision you have to make is one of values. You can't just sit there and say, well, I guess the market has spoken, so my cities and towns deserve to die. No, I mean, what you recognize is that the market is rigged, and the death and life of small communities, it's a political decision. And whether or not small communities live or die is a question of will, of political will. And that pertains, that circles back to the question of the common good, which is always a very particular question. The common good is not universal, generally speaking. I mean, perhaps you could give some examples.
Well, that's tricky because it's called the common good, but it implies that there's this universalizing tendency. But if you look at it with more realistic eyes, the common has a sphere. There's that very popular meme of conservatives clustering around home and liberals clustering around universalism. But that common has Dunbar's number or some sort of distance to it. It's a spatial concept.
Let me perhaps put it this way. We all recognize Christians understand, whether you believe in the common good or not, Christians understand virtue, that man is sort of tasked by God to pursue virtue, to pursue the good. Communities are also tasked by God to pursue the good. We don't call that virtue. We call that the common good.
Okay.
And I would use that as a corollary to understand what I'm talking about. So if you have a city, the question that I ask is not how do I grow my city's GDP? The question that I ask is, what does it mean to build a great city? And what can I do to help my city pursue the good? I want to live in a community that has real values or pursues virtues. And to bring that back to that economic question, if you're in a place that is being strip mined by an economy that favors Wall Street, Washington, D.C., Ukraine, then what can you do as a local official to make sure that your community doesn't die, to make sure that you are building a strong town that can weather the storm, a place where people want to live, a place where your children will want to stay once they get out of high school? So those are the questions that sort of animate me on the local level, but those are all questions you really have to you cannot be this kind of libertarian, neutrality-minded politician and do anything and actually defend your community against the forces that are, again, speaking as a small town conservative councilman, there are forces out there that are truly eroding our communities. And it was very fast. I really had to just dispense with the illusion that this sort of neutrality was a path forward. And now I'll say this, our library has sort of taken this path of neutrality. Okay. But it's an illusion. What's actually happening is we have built a dam called neutrality to hold back this sexual degeneracy from being flaunted and paraded in front of our children. And that neutrality comes out of a more fundamental value system that is being imposed like there. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to communicate?
It does.
Because somebody can say, well, look, you're being neutral in your library. Well, it looks that way. But I can speak from my own perspective. No, I'm speaking for myself. Like our head librarian would perhaps not disagree, or would perhaps disagree. I think she does operate out of a kind of professional sort of sense of neutrality, that she wants to be welcoming to all different people.
Yes.
But it is ultimately impossible to do that, because when when the pride bracelets are there or some kind of pride promotion is there, by pulling that away, now those people feel unwelcome.
Yeah.
So this is a,
well, insofar as them not being celebrated is to them,
to them
not being accepted.
Yeah, right. It is. You don't celebrate my sexual choices, so I'm being discriminated against. I'm being victimized.
Yeah.
That's the perception. I mean, it's a sign of the times.
Yeah. So there's something else that you brought up that I think is very pertinent to this moment now, post Charlie Kirk, post yet another moment where the mask is off of the political coalition that's generally called the left. The right is, you said that there are dark places that you can go if you go not left. Not left isn't just this rosy land of freedom and common values. There's forms of degeneracy, forms of uncommon, ungood, perhaps, that can use the right, the reactionary tendency, and the reaction to universalism, the reaction to the wokeism in its various different forms that go too far. You mentioned something about like times of extreme xenophobia. The specter of Hitler is always kind of there on the right, and being used to police the right towards and wrench the right towards this neutral liberalism. So how does the right, or to what capacity does the right need to police, reform, and keep itself on track? And who's allowed to do that? Who gets to decide the exception?
Well, that is the question, right? I mean, I've talked about this a little bit on Twitter. I think I've got a lot of draft tweets that I don't publish, so I can't quite remember what I have and haven't posted. But the question of authority is central. And I don't see a lot of people talking about it. What I see on those who are trying to gatekeep, those who are trying to purge the right, that coalition, what I see are a lot of people who were at one time on the left, or perhaps consider themselves conservative, but they're very, very deeply wedded to a personal value system, and they take it upon themselves to engage in this policing, which is just, it's an authority that is assumed. And that is actually, I think, in sort of from where I come from, a very liberal attitude. There is no sort of, so perhaps, you've got guys like James Lindsay who weren't, they're just self-professed liberals, classical liberals, voted for Obama, campaigned for Democrats, found themselves probably in a similar situation that I found myself in, where transgenderism kind of rattled them. It kind of shook their cage, and some guys perhaps just sort of doubled down on a kind of scientific realism. Maybe I think Colin Wright might be one of those guys where they didn't perhaps dive into Catholicism to sort of find a rootedness or an understanding of the body, of God, of anthropology. They went in a more scientific direction, and they're simply saying, well, this is incoherent, right? You're a biological male or you're a biological female. So, but the same phenomenon of transgenderism probably shook these guys. Mm-hmm. And so they aren't woke. And so they found themselves in our coalition. And some of these just ex-leftists, all of a sudden they're saying, I have this authority to police this coalition. That's one category. And then you also have guys that are probably more like, I don't know, McCain, Mitt Romney, conservatives. I don't know exactly how you would classify guys like maybe Joel Berry and Seth Dillon.
More towards aesthetically, they wouldn't they wouldn't agree with this, but they're a modern instantiation of what used to be called neoconservative. They're neoconservatives, neocons.
Yeah, but do you
The
think
one thread is always it always revolves around Israel. Seems to be their break. So
Yes.
so there is some form of nationalism that they adore, but it's kind of in this post World War II. We have to keep that myth alive.
I think that's right. I mean, that's really well said, because they're not. I hesitate to call Seth Dillon or Joel Berry. I don't want to dismiss them as like a George W. Bush conservative.
No.
I don't think they're that. But what troubles me is all of these influencers who just think they have the authority to start a purge. And even though I can recognize that, well, of course, that there are dark places that ideology can take us. As a Catholic, I am, I try not to be ideological. I try to sort of engage in sort of Catholic realism with the problems that I'm confronted with. I think once you start filtering the problems around you through an ideology, you're probably off to a bad start. I mean, I've been there. I know what that's like to encounter problems, and then you immediately, okay, how does this comport to my ideology?
Okay. Yeah.
That's libertarianism.
Yeah, but I want to
so
kind of hedge you off of the past, because aren't virtues, because you are already doing that. You just have a different language for Christian virtues, values. So there is something that there is a filter at work. I think the key word was realism. So there's the Catholic ideology or set of beliefs, and then there's this realism. So there's this almost sola scriptural kind of interaction between the real, the practical level, and then the transcendent level, the idea level. And there's some sort of interaction that allows communication between those two different data sets to occur, without one being constantly imposed top down, or the other completely dissolving that which is above it.
So I suppose the danger that I'm speaking towards is ignoring or shoehorning reality. So, you can have for example, libertarians are fond of talking about the elimination of, dozens of government departments. They have the confidence to advocate for that. And they are certain of what the future would hold, for example, if the FDA were eliminated. I think I think Catholic realism pushes me in the direction saying maybe you have a good point. Maybe there would be benefits. What would the cost be? Do you think utopia is on the other side of eliminating these departments, or should we perhaps take a sober look at the question? And speaking again from experience here, I'm not trying to sort of read somebody else's mind. It is easy to commit so deeply to an ideology, to let that ideology become fundamental to your identity, that you can ignore prudence. You can maybe ignore what kind of take a realistic approach to eliminating something that's been around for 100 years, right? Like, So maybe
if you look at the potential fallout. So these different government programs are kind of waning right now, and they're going to have to wane. But if you look at SNAP benefits, or food stamps just disappearing, like Thanos Trumpos just snaps it and it's gone. What's going to happen to all those people who are addicted, or whose lives depend, their dependence on the state to feed them? Where are they going to find food? And if you look at how they were weaned onto the state, you're going to have to, like somebody with a longer time preference and just understanding practical reality, kind of understands or would be open to the idea of weaning people off these benefits, and quitting cold turkey will have, and we know they're already kind of unstable anyways. These are a lot of the people who were participating in massive destruction when triggered by political events of their own communities. Like, do you want the inner cities to burn? Is that the trade-off? Or is there a way to onboard another form of independence or dependence on some other way of getting just those benefits?
Yeah, I mean, the question of stability is one that libertarians ignore in pursuit of an ideological justice. And that taxation is theft. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These people don't deserve these food stamps, and so we need to eliminate them just like that. That's an ideological decision. What you're talking about is a realist informed decision. It's a decision formed by realism. Look, I'm not a philosopher, but I think I'm using those words correctly. The idea here is that you can have your values and you can pursue virtue, but you remember you live in the real world.
Yeah.
And that, to sort of bring the conversation back to the matter of the purge, and I think we can call it that. You had talked about the sort of dark places on the right, and my opinion is that these debates should not play out in the public space. They only serve an.
Your mic.
My mic is.
Oh, there we go. Could you make sure that it's pointed a little bit? The pickup pattern's very narrow, but it went out. It's back.
Better?
Yeah, it's
back. Okay.
Yeah.
Just read an article from Charles Haywood called "No Enemies to the Right" or "No Enemies on the Right."
Yeah,
where he's unpacking this concept, and he mentions in this article that the only people it serves to let these purges play out in public are those who stand to benefit from those purges. That is, people who are basically on the left or who are sort of neoconservative, who really just need to gatekeep this the sort of rising new right. And that's instructive because it turns out that those are exactly the people who are engaging in these purges. You don't see guys like, for example, Aaron McIntyre is not a fascist. He's not a neo-Nazi. But you don't see Aaron McIntyre trying to purge fascists and neo-Nazis. Now, I have complete confidence that if Aaron McIntyre was friends with a Nazi or a fascist, that he would likely encourage that person spiritually to reconsider their commitments. That is appropriate. What is not appropriate is to drag those disputes out into the open the way it's been done. We have to remember that we are in a political coalition.
Mm-hmm.
And with that comes a common enemy, which we have. And with that comes allies that we're not going to agree on everything. But we set those differences aside because we do recognize the existential threat of the public enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And the concern here is am I the public enemy to some of these people trying to purge the new right? The idea, it creates distrust.
Mm-hmm.
It creates finger pointing. It creates this chaos in the coalition when all these guys would have to do is keep their mouth shut and send DMs
mm-hmm.
or make phone calls, send text messages.
Yeah. Well, I think analyzing and experiencing and having a hard time with the Joel Berrys and the James Lindsays and their tactics, and agreeing with your analysis of them, their tactics don't seem to be correct in that. So on the internet, and this was...
So the tactical question. So if you want to talk about the tactical question, I'll give you the floor, because that's important too. I guess I'm speaking to something different.
Yeah. Well, so you have like Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate, those guys are there. And there's one way in which, if you see Nick Fuentes as somebody who's completely committed to his cause and yet still young and able to be managed, pointed in a certain direction, given a deeper set of values, if you see him as somebody who's got a lot of potential, but needs a little bit of mentorship. He doesn't have any authority above him. He's kind of shooting from the hip. He kind of constantly shoots himself in the foot. Befriending him, not in a performative way, but sending him counsel would be able to shape his energy in the correct direction. But confronting him head on is only going to give him more power. So tactically, that's the wrong decision. But also, what the left me's, the classical liberals do, is they constantly conflate the Nick Fuentes with all these other characters that they don't like. So they're being dishonest, and they're either blind to the fact that it is a coalition, or sorry about that.
Yes.
Or they want to reform the coalition under their image and then just totalize it and make it no longer a coalition in a practical sense, but rather just another army under which flies their banner, which is ultimately a liberal banner. They're ultimately liberals.
Right. So I actually did just send a tweet out about this exact question. Let me see if I can find that so I can just, I don't remember. Okay. So essentially what I'm suggesting is, this is not just about groypers. What they're doing, they'll talk about Nazis and groypers, but who they're trying to purge is everyone from Dave Smith to Steve Bannon to Aaron McIntyre to anybody who essentially, and you mentioned it earlier, the common thread seems to be a skepticism towards Israel.
And there's something deeply mythic about that. There's something very powerful about that. And I keep on bringing up that conversation and skirting around it, because if you look at it wrong, it'll bite you in the butt or tear your face off. Politically, it's a non-starter, but it's constantly the starter. So there's something else going on there. So it reflects their values in some or many ways. And it's not just Judaism or anti-Semitism. It's something about the rules-based order of which Israel is the concrescence. It's something about the post-World War II rules-based order that they're trying to preserve and get back to. They want to wind back the clock to that end of history and then maybe reboot it there and somehow avoid wokeness and progressivism.
So we locally in the Wells County Republican Party, I'm the education director. We started a speaker series called the Pat Buchanan Speaker Series. So we invite guest lecturers and to a local cigar bar. All the guys come in, got a lot of young guys, and we did an event. We brought in a professor from Steubenville named Ben Reinhard, Franciscan University of Steubenville. And he delivered a lecture on C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and the collapse of the post-World War II myth. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful myth.
It's the one thing that ties us together. It has to be powerful.
Right. It is. I mean, it does tie the country together. It is the new founding, right? Our founding fathers are not actually the founding fathers of the country, the nation, and the myth we live under today.
Yeah.
What I enjoyed so thoroughly about Ben's lecture was, and I think everybody kind of recognizes this, but he did some word association. So when you think of Nazis, what do you think of? And he did this with his results.
when you think of Nazis?
Apologies. This microphone may be having some issues. One moment. Let me see if I can.
Ben,
Okay, testing. Let me try something else here. How does this sound?
Sounds good. AB.
Does that sound better than it did before?
It was just cutting out.
It was cutting out. Okay.
I think it was just a loose connection or something.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try this. One moment. How does this sound?
Terrible, but workable.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah.
Is that the best it sounded?
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one. Okay.
Yeah. It just cut out.
Okay. So let's pick this back up. Ben
word
was,
associations.
Yes. Ben was talking about word association. So you think of Nazis, you think clean, efficient, gray, black, sleek, clean shaven. You think of the Allies, you think scruffy, earth tone camouflage, underdogs. These are words that are evoked. And he said, well, it's Star Wars, right? Like Star Wars is a World War II movie. And it's like, yeah, it is. And, I think we all kind of intuitively, stormtroopers, we all kind of recognize this, good versus evil. Mm-hmm. And this is the myth that is so powerful. It continues. And Star Wars is not the only science fiction World War II movie. I think we all understand that. But during the run up to the Iraq War, the World War II myth was given to us yet again as a justification. This is the axis of evil. Saddam Hussein is trying to conquer the world. He's a new Hitler. And this is collapsing. I thought it was kind of interesting. At the same time that this myth is collapsing, maybe this is poetic. I'm not suggesting anything intentional, but Star Wars is sort of resurrected, and it's just kind of dumb now. As the myth that Star Wars is based on is fragmenting and collapsing, Star Wars itself just kind of sucks. And now it's just kind of a joke. I don't know if you ever watch Red Letter Media. They do the Nerd Crew, and they just make fun of.
It's very interesting. There's a huge cottage industry, or at least a significant cottage industry, just making fun of Star Wars or deconstructing. That's
exactly right.
These myths.
Exactly right. And what Seth Dillon and Joel Berry and some of these other guys kind of represent, they're just kind of Star Wars fans. And they're adults, and when you meet an adult, sort of like, it's okay. Look, it's fine.
They're like Disney adults for the World War II order.
Yeah, that's right. They're Disney adults. That's right. And and everybody understands there's a difference between somebody who takes their kids to Disney World and Disney adults who have the pass to go there. And, it's two obese married people who are just obsessed with Disney. And they spend $5,000-$10,000, and these are the people who end up on Caleb Hammer because they went into debt to go to Disney World.
Yeah,
and I think you put it really well. These are the Disney adults of the post World War II.
If you look at their to go back to Ben Reinhardt, and thanks for putting him on my radar. I'm going to try to get him on my show. But
you will.
When you go back to what Joel and Joel's a great guy. I don't know South at all, so sorry, Joel, for speaking critically of you, but they constantly evoke these screenshots from Lord of the Rings, specifically the movie. They're constantly evoking Boromir and who's Isildur, and not like throwing the Ring of Power. And you think about it, you're like, well, what does that Ring of Power represent? It's not the ring of a king. It's not a ring of local hierarchies of authority. It's universalizing authority that turns everything into a goblin and eats up the whole. It's liberalism. The ring is liberalism.
Yes, it's liberalism. Yes, that is the conclusion that Tolkien, Lewis, and Ben Reinhardt, our guest, have arrived at. That in fact, J.R.R. Tolkien, according to Ben, he told this story that Tolkien believes that the victory of World War II. Let me preface this, right? So you can watch Lord of the Rings and you can think, if you're kind of operating under the World War II myth, that Sauron must be Hitler and the Fellowship must be America. But in fact,
Sauron's the FDR.
you're getting there. What Tolkien believed was that the Allies' victory in World War II was as if we took the ring from Sauron and used it against him. That was Tolkien's view on the war. And you can read his letters. You can see that he referred to the Allies as Babel builders. The Lord does not look kindly upon us. The use of the nuclear weapon, he called it was lunacy. He referred to the physicists who built it as lunatic physicists. This is so insightful what you're saying, that the ring is liberalism. And perhaps another way to put this, liberalism is a modernist ideology. It was born during the Enlightenment. And there's this hydra of modernity, three-headed dragon. It's totalitarianism. The dragon is totalitarianism, but the heads of the dragon are fascism, communism, and liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
That's the conclusion, once you sort of begin to look at the world through that lens and you understand liberalism as something other than just freedom. It's actually a totalizing ideology unto itself, all its own. That's when you just sort of like, oh yeah, I guess I am post-liberal.
Yeah. Well, it's a totalizing ideology that maximizes liberalism and then negotiates the conflicts of interests that maximizing freedom would give rise to. And that's why you have, oddly enough, you have women's rights being enshrined in government and then trans rights upstaging them. And they're all kind of a piece that follows through on the liberal logic, which I don't think we really want to give up, of you are responsible for yourself, and we can't have a centralized authority dictating everybody's behavior, be that cultural or uncultural, but liberalism eventually does that anyways. It eventually proceduralizes, and then under the guise of neutrality, maximizes self-expression, and that's the transgenderism is the most evident form of that, especially because it's dressed in a rainbow, which has a mythology of its own, but it's targeted at children. It's targeted at eroding the bonds of family and then of the purpose of your body to produce more human beings. And the whole nexus of sacralization that the West is founded on.
We're dealing with something that is insidious. Sort of the end of liberalism, or the sort of height of liberalism, is deeply corrosive to the human person. Let's talk about that. So from a Catholic perspective, and perhaps more broadly, even from a Christian perspective, what is happening is the fragmentation of the social order. We just as we split the atom in World War II, the end of the sort of liberal world order is to split the atom of society, which is the family. And you do this
in the name of the individual.
It's individualism, right? It's a radical I don't even know if I want to use the word radical individual. It's just a consistent form of individualism. It's taken 400 years to get to this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure you had individualists in the 18th century who were sort of proto woke, like Henry de Saint-Simon. I mean, perhaps Francis Bacon. But so you spoke to the question, this like feminism and transgenderism, right? We're constantly splitting society into its component parts, mm-hmm. so as to free those parts from bonds, from authority. That is, from authorities beyond the self.
Mhm.
And in that way, I think what we're dealing with is deeply satanic, deeply demonic. Wouldn't have used that language 5 years ago, but I would use that language today.
It triggers less and less people because they're the bedrock of liberalism that we all grew up in doesn't have the terms to conceptualize evil other than Lord of the Rings in a movie form. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, so there's a board game called War of the Ring that I'm trying to learn, and it's a 2-player game. You can play with 4, but it's a 2-player game, and one person plays the forces of darkness, and the other person plays the free peoples. And the free peoples have a very limited army. The forces of darkness have infinite troops. It just takes a while to get them up, and it's a beautifully asymmetric game. The free people can either get a military victory by just getting enough power, but they're all scattered and they're all distinct and they're different. Or sending the ring to Mordor, right? Usually it's send the ring to Mordor and stave off the forces of darkness, but the forces of darkness are a totalizing ideology that just infinitely floods. It is like kind of like mass immigration. It's just mass immigration to just, but so when we talk about the right,
yeah.
What?
I was thinking Starship Troopers, the
bugs.
Bugs. So
Yeah.
Total. Yeah.
But so under the framework of the free peoples, to conceptualize how the right or the not left goes forward, there are these different distinct identities that have a basis of understanding of each other, but they're very distinct in their orders, and they don't want to cede their own hierarchies and individual their distinctness of culture and of what they think of as pride. And Tolkien does part of his brilliance is to allow these different cultures to breathe and to have kind of their own flavor. Getting these people to work together is the plot of the book, right? It's not just destroying the ring. It's like, how do these distinct people come together? And they do a lot of infighting, and they do have like scars, and they distrust each other, and they kind of like, they have to dust off like their weapons because they've forgotten the tools of power, and power itself has kind of fallen into kind of degraded. Right.
What an irony, Ben. I mean, you've really turned the Lord of the Rings critique on its head as it concerns Seth and Joel and some of these other characters and what they're doing. Really, I think Lord of the Rings offers a critique of the purge mentality. Is that what you're speaking to?
I think that you can go there with that.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's certainly what I'm thinking about.
Gandalf had to correct Theoden, right? To get really geeky here, like Theoden, the king of the Rohan, had worm tongue in his ear. He'd kind of gone into dark places, and he'd kind of got black pilled in a certain respect, and he had to be woken up and reminded of his virtue and his values, and that can happen among the coalition of the not left. But it has to happen in a different way than just calling it out and basically feeding the right to the left, feeding the free people to their enemy.
Oh, that's so well put.
For very short-term gain, for like, no, I get to decide who speaks and who doesn't speak. It's very short-term because nobody's gonna. That's not the playing field. You have to let these people speak. You can correct them, but you have to correct them going forward. And was my critique to James, going after those young Republicans in their group chat, literally just joking about Hitler. It's like, these people are the problem. We need to purge them from our midst. I'm like, these people are not going away, and they're going to follow somebody who's productive. They're going to follow strength. They're not going to follow the school marmish tutting, because that's what their entire identity is right now, a reaction to that wokeness, that church lady mentality of, you can't say retard and well, I'm not going to say the 6-letter F word or the 6-letter N word, but there's these bad words that you can't say, but you can say fucking shit and damn all you want. You can be as degenerate as you want with your mouth, but you have to respect these identities, and nobody's going to follow that. They're going to follow strength. So not that, in my rant, not that correction doesn't need to happen. Not that there's not darkness everywhere eternally. Melkor, to continue the geekery, Melkor, the precedent to Saruman, wanted to become eternally dark. And so he infused himself into the world so that humanity would always have to suffer corruption and darkness. Saruman wanted to technocratize darkness and totalize through scheming and through procedure, like open authority. Melkor is already
Saruman or Sauron. I might have misheard.
I'm sorry, Sauron. Yeah, Sauron.
So Sauron wanted to what's the word? So it was a kind of technocratic.
Through scheming, he was always he built technology through the rings. He was always like abetting and what is the phrase? He was always abetting power.
I mean, this is consistent with Ben's view of particularly C.S. Lewis's take on the sort of post-World War II myth. I mean, this is all throughout C.S. Lewis's his fiction. This critique of sort of technocratic rule, as opposed to a sort of older governing of. I mean, this is all kind of in two words. It's after virtue. I mean, this is Alistair McIntyre's book. If you want to understand that book, it's a challenging read in my opinion, but you just read Narnia. Just read the 7 books of the Narnia series, and this in the book The Magician's Nephew might just be the most sort of heavy-handed critique of scientism, or this kind of technocratic governance. I don't know, or technocratic despotism. I'm not exactly sure the right word for it, but there is this word it's the deplorable word that, if spoken, sort of eliminates all life, and it's a spell, it's a curse. And there's a witch, the White Witch, but she goes by a different name in The Magician's Nephew. The name Jadis, that's her name in that book. And she spoke the word, broke an oath, that the magicians, I believe, all the wizards and witches all held an oath that they would never speak this word, and she did. And she rules the planet of Charn, but it's empty. She was the only one that lived. And that is that's the kind of technocratic despotism, I think, that you're kind of speaking to. I mean, that's probably the atomic bomb is what I would guess Lewis had in mind when he wrote that book.
Yeah. I mean, the singularity is breathing down our neck now, which is a different type of modern bomb. But
so, but I suppose to speak more to the purge that's going on. Yeah, if you think you're going to schoolmarm your way out of this thing, if we're just going to longhouse all the young guns, all these hard right guys who are reacting again, like, come on, man.
That's precisely what they're reacting against.
Yeah, like, and and what really frustrates me, because I'm 39 years old, and in Republican Party circles, I'm young, but the people I see all around me are half my age. Like, there are
really
very young men who are getting activated.
Yeah.
And they're not Ronald Reagan fans. Like, they are not neoconservatives. And
well, thank God you have Buchanan. You have like a forebearer,
right?
right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have a folk hero in Buchanan. That, thank God we have him, right? We're carrying the torch. But I view it as my role is to just elevate and mentor these guys.
Yeah.
When I see a young guy step out of line, I'm not putting him on blast on social media. And that's a part of my frustration, is that, like, this is not an occasional thing that Seth and Joel and James do, particularly for James. This is his identity on Twitter now, is to attack what he perceives to be the woke right. And just I mean, I don't want to monopolize this. I want to hear your views on this before I kind of pivot, but I even question the concept of woke right. I think it just means, like, these are people with values. Like, for example, they'll say, well, the woke, they'll have some example. I wish I could think of one off the top of my head, but like the wokes believe in no borders. And then these right-wing guys believe in borders. And so they're basically the same. They're just a coin flip inversion of the other side. Well, you think they're the same because you are liberal. That's what it means to be liberal. You deny the political, and you in doing that, you deny that real political differences can occur, that there's a conflict in values. These are not just technocratic problems to be solved by procedure and neutral processes. Okay. If you've got two guys, like just because like yesterday, the Colts and the Titans are both playing football, that doesn't mean they're the same. They're enemies on the field. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you might be able to say, well, they're the same in the sense that they're both football teams. And you might be able to say that the left and the right are the same and that they're both engaged in the political. And that's what they mean.
Yeah.
To which I say, well, yeah, that's the political. That's what it is to engage. They have competing visions of how society ought to be ordered.
Yeah.
But what James has done is simply to say, well, we shouldn't order society. There should be no politics, which is inherently, that is what liberalism is.
I would push the metaphor a little bit further and say that the liberal assumes that they can be the referee, not seeing that they've punted up politics to a higher level of being able to order the game itself and get to decide and call what happens, what doesn't happen. Yeah, and then they pretend they're not on their own team because their whole thing is to be proto.
They think they're the referee, but they're actually a player in the game.
Yeah.
So it's not perhaps correct to say that they deny the political, but rather that they veil it
under the rules. And then their authority always arises in making calls. They call the shots, and not from like a coach level. And that's the weird trick. They go from referee when they want to control the field to coach when it's most politically expedient for them. They start to speak as though they are conservative or as though they are liberal in order to change the field, and then they go to referee when the field itself gets out of line.
Yeah, and when I know James taken a lot of abuse, but I think a part of that is the dishonest manner in which he switches sides from conservative. He sort of acts as though he's policing the right. He's retweeting Joel, and Joel retweets him. And then, these other guys who are just kind of on this pro-Zionist sort of conservative, the liberal conservative wing of maybe this coalition. But then he also acts like he's above it. And like, man, what side are you on? And you're never going to, like, it's a fundamentally dishonest way of engaging in politics. That is there. I do see that. You're saying he switches hats, right? He's coach and then he's referee. It's like, man, you need to strap on a helmet.
Well, yeah. The conversation is really important to me, and you brought it up why with the young men. Like the whole point of the culture war is to captivate and direct the energies of young men. And wokeness won for a long time. They took over the institutions of education. They incentivized certain power structures. Unfortunately or fortunately, they chose white men as the bearer of all bad. The scapegoated. They scapegoated the white men, and they kind of shunted them out of the movement. So you'd have to be a pretty dysgenic white man in order to rise up in the ranks of the progressive coalition. If you look at the mugshots of Antifa, you'll see what kind of white men are there. If you look at just the governing white men of the Democratic Party, you have Tim Walz, you have, what's that guy? He's basically an AI bot for the Democrats. Pete Buttigieg, that guy?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah, and then you have, I guess, Obama, and then you can kind of get a little bit of masculinity if you play according to the, the Republican path, with John McCain. So they do have some valor back when that's involved in that, but there's nothing inspiring presently. And for some reason, young men existentially need to be political, specifically young white men, people who are heritage Americans, people who were born here, whose families go back, who the entire basis of the old world order mythology is built on their blood, sweat, and tears through World War II, especially, and through the innovations of the civil rights and the post-civil rights world, Reaganism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where their energies are going can only be coalesced under a new myth. And that myth has to have certain properties to it. It has to be invigorating, vital. It has to be okay with male energy and gruffness, but it also, through that acceptance of the reality of male energy, tether that to something that male energy is best served by, which I think would be, in your tradition and in my tradition too, family, business, property, innovation to a certain degree, but not to like total technocratic degree, pioneership. I mean, there's the pieces for a new myth and a new American dream, like already here. They need to be formulated and they need to be participated. Like these young guys have to build it themselves in a certain way. And you're right there, kind of, you're in there. You're doing the work that I think a lot of influencers lack. They want to be preachers. They don't want to be pastors, right? They want to proclaim, but they don't want to actually get in and live day to day with these people and guide them one-on-one. That's why it happens not in DMs. It happens on blast. That's demagoguery. And there's a lot of power there. I mean, that's why we have the Tates and the Fuentes and all those, Tucker Carlson, all the people who get put into that woke right bubble. There's that realm there, but the real work is going to be in relationship.
What you said earlier that a new myth is necessary. And this was a conversation we had with Ben Reinhardt at the Buchanan Speaker Series in the Q&A we hold after the event. And we started talking about, what would the new myth be? Myths are always grounded in bloodshed. And as a Catholic, I think the answer is pretty obvious as to what I think the myth ought to be as a Christian. We talked a little bit about what would an egalitarian myth be? Because a part of the, myths need heroes, but egalitarianism, which is sort of this compete, obviously the World War II myth has heroes. So even though it has sort of spiraled into this sort of egalitarian sort of iteration or if you will, version. And one theory was like, maybe Alien is like the egalitarian myth where there's just like this all consuming force that just murders everybody and a woman just escapes. I don't know if that's the egalitarian myth. It certainly isn't sufficient for young men.
Well, they're not satisfied. I mean, the myth is, well, what they're handed right now is, broadly speaking, goonerism.
Can you
virtue?
What that is? What is goonerism?
Well, there's this really nasty habit that can eat the life energy, specifically out of men, but women are just as prone to it. They just use literature rather than pornography, but just throwing yourself into hedonistic pleasures, massive amounts of all types of pornography. I would think even certain forms of political discourse are pornographic, and that they kind of just like rat at a feeder bar. They just kind of get you off and then deplete your energy and get you off and deplete your energy. So they're offered, their vape pens, their legal drugs, and infinite amounts of pornography. They're not, the system as it is doesn't really offer them upward mobility. There's really no where to go in the egalitarian system, especially where our government is with massive amounts of client classes and then all these terrible wars all over the world.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that in the egalitarian system, it's almost created, and perhaps it already has created, a new aristocracy of elites, only as opposed to the elites in perhaps a sort of pre-modern world, or even maybe just pre-World War II society. Our elites today are meritocratic, and so they believe that they have earned their position. So they lack a sort of noblesse oblige to those in sort of in the demos, to those in the populace. These elites now that we have are, I mean, they're trained to survive in a liberal world. The elites we have today excel in this liberal egalitarian society. They go to college, they learn how to experiment with drugs, but the liberals have discovered a way, the liberal elites have discovered a way to live with conservative institutions like marriage. Whereas it's sort of the sort of white, dispossessed, unprotected man who engages in drug abuse, opioid addiction, is a victim of that, and it comes from broken homes, endures poverty, doesn't go to church. Like, all of these institutions that have been eroded under egalitarianism are because of egalitarianism, right? We're going to free you from these institutions. Well, these institutions were what gave the lower class, the demos, the people, the virtues of the higher orders of society. And so now we're left with goonerism. Like, what, like, you've freed man from all of these so-called constraints, but those constraints were what kept him from, like, gambling. Well, now you can just gamble on your phone, right? Pornography, you can access porn on your phone. I mean, what is freedom when you're a slave to to all these vices? And what I've just said, as I've kind of stumbled around or kind of gone on this prolonged really reflection of what is post-liberalism, it's just kind of recognizing that, like, there's no freedom in this. Like, when the post-liberal understands that these lower form, these institutions that sort of in almost like a Christian subsidiarity, these institutions that our elites enjoy, once upon a time elevated the lower classes. But, like, that is to say, property ownership, marriage, family, generational thinking, church, voluntary associations, like fraternal organizations. You don't have, once upon a time, you didn't have to go to Harvard to be a part of a fraternal organization, because there were local fraternal organizations that sort of fulfilled those same functions. And you would have, you had social capital through those organizations. Well, now, as has been cataloged extensively, those voluntary societies, those local fraternal organizations, et cetera, are fragmented. They're dissolved. They don't exist anymore.
Well, there's no need for them. They were necessary. If you look at Tocqueville, whose father was murdered during the French Revolution, and he was a lawyer, brilliant young mind. He went over and he kind of studied America. He did this anthropological study of America, and you see these little pockets of communities that are kind of self-directed, and they have this way of life that is very modular and distinct, and they allowed each other breathing room to a certain degree. And I had this thought a couple months ago that liberalism is a particular technology for and by Christians. It worked within a Christian order. If it operates on the bedrock of a certain level of pre-existing assumptions about virtue. Capitalism itself, that was kind of described by and named by Adam Smith. Adam Smith, the philosopher of capitalism, his main work, the one that he loved and really cared about, was about morality, was about ethics. And this system of capitalism, the system of liberalism, works really well for a high trust society. Now, what happened over the course of massive amounts of prosperity, and then these tight-knit communities and all this technology comes into place, and we establish all these orders that we no longer really need to rely on the fraternal orders, the voluntary associations, because we're kind of outsourcing them, and then we have all these bureaucratic structures, and then we can travel a bunch, and we're moving around constantly. We're kind of constantly shuffling, and we're no longer embedded over generations in any one given place. So it kind of feeds into itself. The ability to look at my property as some sort of fungible resource allows me to maximize the profitability of that, but it also ties me, like, I participate in the system that kind of erodes my deep-rooted connections, but gives me a lot of flight. It gives me a lot of upward mobility in a way. But now we're reaching an inflection point or a turning point where all those older technologies, these voluntary associations, church, older forms of belief, these structures that had bottled us up, and that once we broke, we were able to fly, but now we're falling. We need to go back into those things. And so we need to at once recognize that we are post-liberal, and that liberalism is still foundational to who we are. We grew up in it. There's certain forms of it that we don't want to give up. We want freedom of association. We want freedom of conscience. We want freedom of speech. We want, and then different iterations that follow on those basic principles. We want forms of human rights and universalism. We just don't think it scales to a universal totalizing structure. And so the retreat from that universal totalizing structure, we need to accept it, digest it, and then bring it back and revitalize those institutions that allow it to be possible, but that without we don't have the meaning that we need to have in order to get through the coming crisis. Does that plot arc work?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you're talking about threading the needle here, because you say, we have all of these elements of liberalism that we like, and we kind of recognize that these elements of liberalism sort of emerged out of Christendom, and we've stretched them beyond the breaking point. And what we kind of want is we understand that there are these universal forms, but they can't be necessarily applied universally. Mm-hmm. So this, again, I do think the Catholic Church in its social teaching hits the nail on the head as it concerns subsidiarity. We're talking about sort of an appreciation for particular peoples in particular places, and that these higher levels of authority really only have that they step in to those lower forms of authority when those lower forms of authority lack the resources to do what they ought. So you see this probably most explicitly when Child Protective Services steps in, the state steps into a family. The family is the most fundamental sort of governing unit in the social order, and the state respects its authority until it sort of it becomes deformed, and it no longer actually uses its authority with justice, or it abuses its authority against its members. At which point the state steps in, and it's a great tragedy when that happens. We recognize that as a tragedy, which is an important point. It's not as though we believe that the state has the capacity to better order the family. It's that the family has, in a particular case, the family has collapsed in on itself. The child will never be as happy as he could be if he was in his family with a loving mother and loving father. The orphanage is not better, right? Than the optimal situation in a sort of natural family setting. But the state, in a tragic moment, has to step in. That is what I think many of us would prefer to see writ large, where these higher forms of authority actually, I mean, it's trite to say it, but just do what they ought to do. The constant interference that we see today. I mean, to the point where there really is no limitation on these higher forms of authority. And but I want to circle back to a comment what you were talking about in terms of function, the function of these lower organizations, these sort of lower orders, these voluntary associations and these fraternal organizations. I can speak from experience. In my small town, we have Rotary, and we have the Elks, and we have the Moose, and we have these, sort of these voluntary associations and these fraternal organizations, Masons, which I can't join. But I never got connected in my community until I really joined the Republican Party. And you start attending events and breakfasts, and you start engaging with your neighbors, and you start looking at your community as a community, not just an economic zone, but actually as something with an identity and a history that ought to be preserved and sort of leaned into as we move forward. And that engagement in the party sort of created this opportunity to reach out to and sort of mentor, although I don't necessarily consider myself a mentor, even though I don't have a lot of one-on-one relationships with the young men in the Pat Buchanan Speaker Series, but there is perhaps some level of mentorship, or my effort, my intention is to elevate these young guys as best I can. And we were having a conversation after our last event, and there was a tweet sent out by a politician, and it was pretty obviously an AI written tweet. It was a great tweet, but it was just, that's AI. And then it was a Republican, and then a Democrat retweeted it, and their quote tweet was also written in AI. So I'm watching basically, like, it felt like I'm watching like Terminator. I mean, it's like, here's Arnold fighting the T-1000. Like, it's just two robots going back and forth here. And we were talking about that's like, the internet in Twitter were created to connect human beings. And ironically, it actually has disconnected us. And now we may be arriving at the point where if you actually want connection with people, like if you actually want to talk to a person, you might just have to go back to the pub, to the bar. And so the internet has almost uninvented itself, or at least its original purpose. And perhaps moving forward, as this technology, if there perhaps aren't AI protocols put in place to sort of aggressively get control over that, if you have a website that's just a bunch of robots talking to each other as massaged by human beings, if you want to talk to people, you might just have to go back to these fraternal organizations. They could kind of redevelop their own function that they lost in sort of internet revolution.
Yeah. And one wonders how they're going to be different by going through that evolutionary bottleneck and then being reinvigorated, being reinvented. They're going to have a different character. I do a lot of interviews for this channel, and there's a certain class of people that are definitely boomers, and I speak to them. I'm like, I don't know if I want to publish this because this is just another boomer take, and it's like, it's not. I want to preserve it and give it its due because they're my fathers. They're the people who came before, and for all the ways that we can criticize them, they still did really good with not just for themselves, but they did very well for us in so far as they propped up and facilitated this nation becoming so great in so many different ways, even if it's failing at this point. But there's this one thing that characterizes the boomer is this. I can just tell that they're looking into a future that no longer exists. They thought we're going to have jetpacks, and we don't have jetpacks, but they're still, you can just tell they're not connected to what's going to happen. And I don't know who is connected to what's going to happen, but I can sense when somebody's open to being connected to what's going to happen. And my job is to kind of keep my senses clean enough to be aware of the possibilities and the things that could arise. And what could arise could be bad. But if I use a moral judgment, I'm going to be, I can sense that that's not how the future is shaped. The future was shaped morally through the civil rights and through post World War II, and that we're kind of watching the dissolution of a moral based order. It was invented through heroic action, and then it got codified into a moral system of virtue, and that system of virtue is equality, liberty, fraternity, and a lot of the things that make the liberal order kind of make moral sense. But you can't just have your whole identity at this point be anti-Nazi, anti-fascist, even anti-communism, even anti-liberalism. Like that reactionary sort of preservation of that morality is not the way that you can hear the new. And so I just want to highlight what you're doing. I don't know to what degree you're able to be a mentor or not, but just being connected to these young guys and taking a stance of brothership and maybe an avuncular, which is an old word meaning uncle-like stance towards them. Not an authoritarian stance, but a leadership stance.
Yeah, I mean, so mentorship, in my estimation, is a very one-on-one kind of relationship, which I don't really have with any of these men. But what I do have is just a desire to see them succeed and to elevate them within the Republican Party, because these guys, they don't seem to be captured by the same, I think the way you described it was just almost a stare into the future that they understand things can get bad.
Mm-hmm.
They are not captured by the myth of World War II. Right.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah. So there is this, I mean, the World War II myth is almost this analysis of history. It's progressive, right? I mean, instead of being a myth that pulls us into sort of a mixed reality, that is, we have problems. There will always be problems. There is no utopia around the corner. We live in a world that's messy, and there's no anxiety about that. The political process is one that plays out over generations, and I think these guys just kind of accept that as it is, as opposed to the really shrill, anxious moralizing that you find in other sort of worlds, other places, other people, where we're like the progressive view of history is one that we're kind of moving ever upwards into the future. And we can, if we just pass this law here and that law there, we're going to achieve utopia. No, I think the young conservative sees this less about moving in, being on the right side of history, moving into the future. And it's more about just order. It's more about continuity. It's about not like drastically interrupting ways of life with social experimentations. They're just kind of, it's not that there isn't a sense of urgency. There is, but there is not an ideological capture of the mind. And go ahead.
No, go on.
So perhaps, and it's just, there's this, again, as somebody who was once ideologically captured, I feel as though I can identify those who are and those who aren't after some quality conversation. And those who are ideologically captured, even the conservative, not even necessarily the progressive, but the Reaganite conservative, the boomer con, they have an anxiety about them. We've got to get back to the Bible. We got to get prayer back in schools. Look at all the lies that they're teaching our kids. Like, I get it. But these are problems that, this is why we're in the party. This is why we're engaged in politics, because we want to bring sort of our contribution to the struggle. But it is a struggle. And there's just kind of an embrace, like, man, there's like a local archetype. I
Really?
assume it's the old guys that get together around the coffee table for breakfast and they complain about the world. And they never do anything about it. They just complain. And I have a lot of respect for these young guys who are like, you know what? No, it's not enough just to sit around and complain about it, to live in ancapistan in my own head, to just tweet about it. What we actually have to do is start showing up. And I say elevate these young men. What I mean is little things like get on your local zoning board, get on your school board, become a precinct committeeman in your local party, maybe run for office, take some leadership classes. Just, decisions are made by those who show up. That's a sign that used to be posted in our Republican Party headquarters. Most important thing is showing up. You can have all the right ideas, but if you just keep them to yourself, or you just complain at the breakfast table with all the old guys, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I hate to kind of borrow the biblical concept of faith and work, the Christian, but there's no separation here. We as Christians, we embrace work. As Christians, we embrace this sort of incarnational engagement. And that is that I think that's what Catholic social teaching asks of us. That's what the church asks of us. The common good is not some abstract thing. The common good is not just individual rights or universal human rights. The common good is something we work at. And maybe that's all I have to say about that. But I'm fascinated by this distinction. And okay, let me ask you a question: Is there some boomer elements to the gatekeeping that you see happening right now?
I think you specifically.
Specifically, they're sort of seeing a future that just isn't going to happen.
I think you really helped me just now to understand, to see an aspect of it that's totally obvious now that you pointed it out. It's that anxiety. If you look at discourse, especially on the not left, like the dissident right, the E-right, there's this, and it's embodied in the leftist can't meme, where the leftist meme it has to use so many words, and it's always moral. It's always like there's always this moral element. It's always forwarding some sort of moral prejudgment or bias, and the real meme just punches right through. It uses a couple of words to point you in a direction and then a picture to capture it. And it's a very explosive, powerful mode of communication. But the bedrock of it is humor or playfulness. And people, that doesn't mean you can't be serious. It doesn't mean you can't like be vicious with that art form or to communicate serious, powerful ideas, but the tenor of it is anti-anxiety. And when you succumb to anxiety, that's when you try to, ironically, even if you're trying to save people from themselves, you have to control the discourse. things are going to get out of hand. Things are going to go too far. We don't want things to go too far. And once you start acting in that, you have to explain yourself and then communicate to it. And then you start policing words and kind of separating the wheat from the chaff and getting ahead of discourse. But discourse is just this rolling, innovative field. And the memes that are going to work, and it happens constantly. That's why the right, whatever that is, right now online, specifically on Twitter, is so hilarious, and they get obsessed with these. There was this wife jack meme a year ago. It's like this image of this wife, and you look at her, you know who she is, and that's my wife. It's like I know her. And then yesterday, like a couple of days ago, it was the Will Stancil meme. It's just like, and it just blows up. It's this huge deal, and it's gone in 42, probably about 3 days, which is the life cycle of any given catastrophe. Charlie Kirk lasted a little bit longer, but he's about the resonance of the impact of that event is already kind of moving on. And that's how we got to the meme of these young Republicans, dicking around in a private group chat. And if you come and you make fun with them of them, if you can mimetically correct them, that's a totally different argument than hand wringing, pearl clutching. And it has to do with the anxiety, and anxiety has to do with control. It has to do with, I'm unstable. The world is unstable. I have to stabilize things. And that always eventually leads to imposing order on things. And that's where you get the loss of being able to shape discourse and trying to control discourse. And so I guess when I speak about boomerism, it's not necessarily about that anxiety, but it is this future that never was, past that never will be again, kind of crusty way of, it's like using memes that are dead. It's like, no, that meme is dead. We burnt that one out. We're no longer doing the Miyazaki, like the Spirited Away thing over everything. That had a moment with his son. So there's something that you brought up to me about that anxiety, where that anxiety comes from and how it manifests ultimately in cringe.
Yeah. And maybe that's in some sense what we're watching right now in The Purge is like, yeah, we talked about it before. I mean, it's Disney adults, like it's cringe. It's like, oh, you're still using the World War II meme. Like it.
Well, that's really interesting, because what's happening, which is kind of perturbing on one level, but also kind of hilarious and freeing on another level, is that the E-right, the right-ishness on, well, the rightward leaning content creators are embracing the imperial. They're embracing, not that I don't see them embracing Saruman or Sauron, but they do a lot of like stormtrooper memes, are they identify the fascist.
Yes,
They invert that.
Right. And that's an interesting question as to whether or not it's a good meme or not. But the fact that, we're
the Hitler edits, mustache memes.
Yeah. And like, I guess maybe the word is transgressive. I don't know, but
that's the critique from the left memes, that that what defines wokeness is transgression for transgression's sake. And my argument is that these guys aren't being transgressive just for transgression's sake. They're being transgressive in order to break down the prevailing order that's old, and it has no better embodiment than Joe Biden. Like, that's what we got, which is ironically the most Emperor Palpatine of all presidents.
This is a good example of the referee, where it's like, oh well, you have the left and they're woke and they're transgressive, and you have the right and it's the woke right and they're really transgressive. Look, you've got the trannies on the one side, you've got the Nazis on the other, they're all the same. It's like, well, no, they're not all the same. You're actually missing what's most important here, is that the left is transgressive against institutions that still have life, marriage, family, tradition. And the right is transgressive towards things that are sort of fake and don't have life. I mean, if you're tranny and you believe in abolishing the family, like, oh, I guess you had daddy issues, right? Like you had a really rough childhood. Your parents got divorced, right? There's a reason, like, but the right winger who is that doesn't, I'm not trying to like armchair psychologize anybody here, but like the force of, or the direction of these sort of imperial memes, it's transgressive against something, again, that's really cringe, that's dying, that you like Star Wars, like
Luke.
Star 20 years ago, Star Wars carried weight. And now it just sucks. It's just childish.
Mark Hamill said it best in a tweet from a few years ago where he just said gay, 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 in response to a total fake problem where you can't say gay, like a total made up problem. And he's a rebel like against like.
That's right. Don't say gay, right? It was the Florida bill.
But he was actually expressing like the end all be all of the rebels. It's kind of gay.
Gay. What an incredibly poetic moment, right? Like here's your Luke Skywalker, and he's like, his hero's journey ends with his pants falling off at an award show, and he's just saying gay, 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 gay all that's like, that is the most incredible. Again, like it just, man, you couldn't write that.
It's the gods of the mimetic, the mimetic forces,
and so like like anything, a meme is delicate. It's like a flower. It blooms and then it dies. But I think, and I got to be honest. Like there are times when there are like Star Wars memes that would be, or Star Wars GIFs that would really be appropriate as a response to something. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. It's so cringe. Just like but I think that's, I think what you're talking about there, like just kind of inverting or embracing the imperial, or sort of reinterpreting Star Wars. I've seen this before. Like, well, actually Empire was the good guys. I think that's actually kind of interesting. Right. And I understand why it's cringe, because Star Wars is cringe, but if you can kind of get past this, and you can kind of understand that we're trying to unpack a myth that we've all been living under. And you're just like, I'm not trying to be cool. I'm not trying to be cringe. I'm just trying to analyze something that's interesting that we all share. I mean, like I think that's fascinating. And again, like I think it's fascinating that Star Wars is kind of like they tried to resurrect Star Wars like during this, like the end of liberalism, like the first Trump administration. They're trying to bring back Star Wars, and what is it? It's just a repeat of the first. It's so they just
without the heart,
without the heart, right? I mean, right.
All your myths are dead, and the girl bosses like can do no wrong. So the Force is female. Identity is
the Force is female, right? Yeah. And I don't know. The only reason I mean, we're talking about the myth of World War II, and I suppose that's why it's relevant. I definitely would encourage you to reach out to Ben Reinhard and get him on here. I can't tell you that I'm taking notes on my phone during the lecture, and my phone is like blowing up because guys are texting me like, this is incredible. And Ben's ability, I mean, it's the greatest lecture I've ever heard. I don't know another way to describe it. I won't go on about it. It was just, he will not disappoint you as a guest. If you want to talk about Lewis, Tolkien, and the myth of World War II, I could not imagine anybody better.
Well, Brandon, we should wrap up this podcast. Let's
sure. This has been a long one.
Yeah, it's a nice hunk, and I'm looking at your Twitter page because you do have a link, but it's to your.
Oh yeah, I'm a politician, man. That's to my donate.
Politician. Page. So taxpayers first, and donate. That's very great. What are you running for? Where can people find you? What are they going to find when they get there?
I mean, I'm on Twitter or on X as Paleo GOP. That's my handle. And then that's really all I do as far as online. I mean, you can always add me as a friend on Facebook, but I'm less active there. Facebook is it's just a very different world. It's much more local. So, I have a Harnish for Wells County Facebook page, but it pertains much more to sort of it's localist. I mean, you can still, the spirit's the same. It's just the messaging's different. I'm not going to talk about, generally speaking, national political issues on Facebook, and the posting's less frequent.
Yeah. You got anything else in the line? If somebody needs to rent some warehouse space, you
No. So in January, we're bringing in Josiah Lippincott. I'm not sure if you've ever talked with him before.
No.
He's on X. He's an intelligent guy from Hillsdale working on his PhD. May already have it. He's coming in January to deliver a talk for a fundraiser. I'm running for re-election for county council at this point. And then in the summer, we're bringing in Pete Quinones for a fundraiser, and he's going to deliver a talk. So we're excited to have those guys. We're going to make raise some funds for the re-election campaign, for the political war chest. And again, I kind of view my role as twofold in politics, right? Obviously, I'm doing my job, trying to promote my county and see to its well-being. But then there's the political, or perhaps the sort of more partisan side of it, where I want to elevate these guys. So bring podcasters and Substackers and Patreon guys and guys on X into the real world, into the Republican Party. When I joined the Republican Party in 2021, I believe it was, I actually joined, or 2020 perhaps. There was a huge gap, a chasm between the Republican Party in the real world and the Republican Party on the internet, and that gap has closed significantly with Trump selected J.D. Vance. That was a major move, and so now I see that gap closing. I know that X, group chats move X, and X moves the White House. And so the gap is closed. And so my sort of mission here is to continue to close that gap, to get guys who are popular on X and bring them into the Republican Party fold in small ways, whether it's through our educational program or whether it's through just personal fundraising efforts. It's still a campaign, and they belong in the real world. They belong in the party. Look, this party has to change. It is not that there are guys waiting for the Trump Vance era. They probably think it's just a passing storm, and we have to be more than that. We have to just pound them for decades until they go away or we outlive them. So, you talk about the eyes of the boomer, right? And if you want to walk into the eye of the boomer storm, that is the Republican Party.
Excellent. Brandon, I had a terrific time discoursing with you.
Never talked to you before, but so I think we vibed okay.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And I'll send people to your place, your links down there in the description. And so thanks very much for your afternoon.
Benjamin, I appreciate it.